To all the candidates, do you support provincial government funding for Section 95 co-ops to replace the subsidy that will disappear when their operating agreements with the federal government end? That's a pretty direct question. And we'll move up a candidate, and we'll begin with Mr. McGowan.
I'm not sure what Section 95 housing is.
Oh, no. At least he's honest.
But I do support increased funding from the province, and also some communities are better able to contribute as well. I know Burnaby has a $600 million reserve fund that they're sitting on. They get lots of density bonusing from the developers in the 4 town centers in Metro Town, and they've committed to spending 20% of that on affordable housing, and right now they're not spending any of it, or not very much of it at least. So I'd like to see that change, but I do support in replacing some of the funding from the federal government, because it doesn't look like the federal government's at this point willing to do anything about it. So we need to show leadership in British Columbia, and also in our municipalities, if they can afford it, to take place of what the federal government is not doing.
Thank you. Mr. Simpson.
In the last 2 years, in budget estimates, I've raised this issue with Minister Coleman, who's had the housing portfolio, and we've discussed this issue. In both years, he has told me that the housing ministers across the country, the provincial ministers, have been engaged in this discussion at that level and engaged with the federal minister on the issue as well. I have no idea where those discussions have gone, and he's not been particularly forthright in terms of how that has been moving forward. So the first thing that we need to do is determine what is the state of that discussion with the federal government. I don't want to let the federal government off the hook for their responsibilities here. But at the end of the day, the reality is also that there are 6,500 odd units of housing that will be impacted by this in British Columbia in your sector. And we need to pay attention to that. And we are going to need to determine how we don't leave 6,500 families in a place where they can't afford their homes. So that needs to be addressed. But quite honestly, I wouldn't want to say we are going to do that and let the federal government off the hook at this point until we have some pretty tough discussions with them. And it's my hopes that the other provincial jurisdictions who are facing the same situation within their provinces are also being hard on the federal government not to download and walk away from this responsibility. So we need to have that discussion, and then if those discussions aren't fruitful, we'll need to deal with the issue. But 6,500 families not being able to afford their home is not acceptable.
Thank you. Mr. Pandey.
I was given a little brief of Section 95, and it is actually I support it. Right now, federal government has a lot of money, and they are supporting it. So when they stop supporting it, where will that money go? What will they do with the money? So we'll continue to fight with the federal government to keep that money where it is. We will contract with them to continue with the contract, because I believe it's expiring March of next year.
Over a period of time.
Over a period of time, it's going to disappear. So we'll continue to talk with the federal government to have that funding while we find a solution as a British Columbian. When we work as a British Columbian, we have enough money in our system that we could slowly replace from federal government to provincial government. And that will solve our problem.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Sullivan.
So the question is, do I endorse the federal government weaseling out of its responsibility social housing, co-op housing, and giving it over to the province? No, absolutely not. I think it's important for the federal government to continue its responsibility And that would be my number one choice. There's a lot of call on provincial resources. And what I can tell you, and this is, I just want to make sure I communicate the position of the BC Liberal Party, is that we need a strong Skookum government, a strong Skookum economy to bring in enough revenue that we can afford all of the social expenditures we need. And that is our number one priority, creating an environment that is really good to bring in revenue to the public sector so we can afford the programs. I know that is a big problem because there are so many families that are relying on this. I can tell you, when I was in the city government, we did do, I think, one of the first long-term commitments of mortgages or at least leases expired under my term, and we renewed it and we rolled it over. I don't think anybody else on the council really knew the significance of that. It established a precedent to continue to roll over these, and I think I was the only one who got that, the significance of it, but I put it forward to the council and everybody agreed. So I hate to say this, but I'm not big on letting the federal government out of responsibility. Certainly, if they're not willing to take it on, then we're going to have to do something else. I can't commit to what that looks like, but I'd certainly be working to make sure that we can support people who need it.